What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to examine an issue of the X-Men. Today, I am examining X-Men issue 50. This is kind of a landmark issue. We get the introduction of the famous X-Men logo here. This stays with the franchise at least until the late 90s. I want to say early 2000s. That's when we stopped seeing this particular logo. But this was with X-Men the Animated Series. It was with all the merchandise for the X-Men in the 90s. This is the beginning of that logo. And this is also the first issue that Jim Steranko does interior art. He did do the cover of the previous issue, but now he is doing the interior art of the first story. And I guess I should go ahead and credit everyone. So we have two stories in this issue. The first story is written by Arnold Drake with interior penciling by Jim Steranko, inking by John Tartaglione, and lettering by Herb Cooper. And then we have a backup story that's continuing the origins of the Beast. This is written by Arnold Drake with penciling by Werner Roth, inking by John Verpoorten, and lettering by Herb Cooper. And so the first story here is basically just continuing where things left off in the previous issue. Iceman and Polaris were kidnapped by Mesmero and his mutant squad, and then Cyclops and the rest of the X-Men, they are able to find another location where some of Mesmero's followers are. They were using Beast's portable Cerebro device, and then they find out that Iceman has been captured telepathically through Jean, and so they pretend to be defeated so that they can be captured and brought to the same location that Iceman and Lorna Dane are. And then they're there, and then Mesmero is using some kind of device to awaken Polaris's mutant abilities. I don't think they call her Polaris just yet, but it's we're just going to keep calling her that because that's her code name. And so this is a little strange. In the years to come, you don't have to have a device to awaken your mutant powers. But in this storyline, they talk about the latent mutants, and they're using some device to kind of awaken their mutant powers. And that's a little odd. We've never seen anything like that before. We have seen, for example, in the backup stories with Jack O'Diamonds, where he needed to inundate himself with radiation to become more mutated, but we've never seen a device that awakens or amplifies mutant abilities. Although I guess that's not too different from the Cerebro equipment that Professor X has, so maybe it's not that weird. But anyway, Polaris is declared Queen of the Mutants because she is Magneto's daughter, and then at the end of this story, Polaris, she defeats Mesmero and his cronies, but then Magneto comes out of the shadows and he says, "Yep, I'm your dad." And the X-Men are surprised because they saw him die in Avengers issue 53, I think, and then that's the end of this story. And then the backup story, not a whole lot happens here. Pretty much this is just expanding on a brief flashback that we saw back in the three-part Sentinel storyline. We saw that when Beast was in high school, some burglars had run out onto a football field while he was in the middle of a football game, and then he climbed up on the field goal and was able to stop them, but he exposed himself as a mutant to the crowd. And this is adding a whole lot to that, because we see that happen here, but Professor Xavier is nowhere to be seen, and we do see a cameraman has filmed Beast doing this. And up until now, Professor X seems content to erase everyone's memories of someone's mutant abilities. For example, in the Iceman origin stuff, Professor X erased the entire town, including Iceman's parents, erased their memories of Iceman being a mutant. It's going to be really difficult for him to do that here because the cameraman says that like 50,000 people or something like that. It's a really high number of people who saw Beast being a mutant out in the middle of this football game. So I don't know if Professor X is going to wipe all of those memories. That's a lot of memories to wipe. But we do see some supervillain wearing some kind of costume is watching this football game, and he sees Beast, and he wants to use Beast for his own schemes. So there's quite a bit more going on here than what we saw in that flashback sequence back in the three-part Sentinel storyline. So not a whole lot going on there. I absolutely love Jim Steranko's artwork here. I feel like, I don't remember which philosopher it was, either Aristotle or Plato or Socrates, one of them came up with the cave analogy, where someone is in a cave and they're chained and they're facing a wall and they see shadow puppets on the wall, and then that's all that they've seen for their entire life, and then they're released from their shackles and they turn around and they see the shapes that were making the shadows on the wall, and their entire life has changed. That's what I feel like looking at Steranko's artwork here. It is a thing to behold, and that is nothing against any of the artists who have come before. I've come to like quite a few of the artists on this book over the years, but Steranko Steranko feels like an alien being coming down and saying, that's fine, that's what you guys have been doing, but here's what you could be doing with your artwork. It is almost psychedelic. It's just absolutely grabs you from page one, and as soon as I turn the page and we're in the flashback stuff with Werner Roth's art, again, nothing against Werner Roth or any of the other artists, but when I'm reading his stuff, I'm like, man, I wish Steranko was drawing this. He is easily my favorite artist to be on any of the X books so far. Really love what he's doing. I feel like Steranko is not recognized enough for changing the game with superhero comics, and I'm surprised that he didn't do more stuff over the years. Of course, I mentioned this in the previous issues video, but he did do Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's not a series that I read a whole lot of. I think I read the first appearance of Nick Fury where it was drawn by Jack Kirby, but I haven't read any of Steranko's Nick Fury stuff, and that's not a character that I'm especially interested in as his own ongoing feature, but I'm really curious if Steranko did more stuff. Like, did he do Avengers? Did he do Spider-Man? I know he wasn't on X-Men very long, so I'm really trying to enjoy this brief run while he is on this series. But I absolutely love his artwork here. There's a big double spread page where one of Mesmero's groups, they're in a vehicle going into the desert where there's this really interesting looking big mutant city that they built. A lot of really interesting artwork here and interesting ideas also. Mesmero and his people, they worship Magneto, and it really reminds me of the early 2000s when Magneto was believed to be dead, and you saw a lot of people kind of worshiping the idea of Magneto in Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. You had Quentin Quire and his group. They really liked the radical ideas of Magneto, and they were trying to take that to the next level. It feels a lot like that here. It is a little strange that Mesmero seems so familiar with Magneto and all of his methodology and his technology. At one point, they use knockout gas on the X-Men, and they say that Magneto invented this knockout gas. And we have seen that Magneto is a little bit more of a mad scientist in the Silver Age issues than he later will be. By the time you get into the late 70s, early 80s, whenever he is an enemy of the X-Men, he's not using weird science fiction machines to fight the X-Men. Mostly, he just uses his magnetic powers. Although, there is a little bit of that later on when you get to the X-Men Avengers miniseries, where Magneto is being hounded by the Avengers. He does have some of his old brainwashing machinery, so there is a little bit of that survives on up until the modern day, but you don't see nearly as much of that in later years as you do in the 60s. So they are really kind of exploring that aspect of Magneto, but I have to wonder, how are these guys so familiar with Magneto? Because you look at a lot of the stuff that Magneto did over the years, and a lot of that is not stuff that Joe Schmo on the street would be familiar with. For example, Magneto attacked a military base in, I think, Florida in the first issue. That's something the military would have been aware of, but Joe Schmo on the street probably would not have known who Magneto was. He had Asteroid M. That was a big epic battle that took place in outer space. Most people on Earth would not have been aware of that. The only thing I can think of that Magneto did that everyone in the planet would be aware of, he took over a third world nation and then basically just bailed out and tried to blow up the third world nation, and then Quicksilver disarmed that bomb. Now, it's possible that he has shown up in some Avengers stories. He did show up in Avengers before the X-Men Avengers crossover where he allegedly died, so maybe he did some more global stuff that everyone was aware of, but all of the battles between him and the X-Men that we have seen in the series so far, we don't really get to see what does the rest of humanity think of that. We don't really get to see how humans are reacting to Magneto and his philosophy of mutant supremacy. We don't really get to see very much of that, which is kind of a shame because this series is supposed to be about X-Men, feared and hated by a world they are sworn to protect. We get some humans who don't like mutants, but we don't really get to see their reaction to the evil mutants who do believe that they are above humans. We don't get to see much of that. So it is a little weird that Mesmero, who we had never seen before the previous issue, issue 49, is so familiar with Magneto and seems to know about his methodology and everything that he did, knows about his technology and stuff like that, it's weird that he acts so familiar with all that. And then Magneto shows up here, and we will probably know more in the following issue, but I can't tell here if Magneto was allied with Mesmero, or if he's coming in after Mesmero has been defeated, and he's like, I wasn't affiliated with that guy. He worshipped me, but we never worked together. I can't really tell, and we'll probably get more of that later on. But if you are familiar with some of the early Chris Claremont X-Men stuff, there is an issue in the first, it's before the Dark Phoenix saga, so it's within the first 5 years of Claremont's X-Men run, but there is a storyline where Mesmero kidnaps the X-Men, and then there's a very similar reveal here with that issue, and I'll go ahead and spoil that issue. I don't even remember the issue number, but where Mesmero has captured the X-Men, and then he thinks that he is all that in a bag of chips, and then Magneto comes in and he says, yeah, it's me, Magneto, bow down before me. Similar reveal here to that. Also, speaking of stuff that's similar to stuff that would come later, in the very first issue of Adjectiveless X-Men in 1991, there is a really cool sequence that is burned into my brain where all 15 of the X-Men are kind of practicing with each other in basically a really advanced game of tag. I think basically one group of X-Men is trying to tag Professor X and the other group is trying to stop that group, and at one point Archangel is carrying Colossus in non-armored form while flying through the air, and then he's flying towards the mansion, and then he flies up, but he lets go of Colossus so that he starts flying towards a window, and then he starts to armor up as he's flying towards the mansion. It's a really cool scene where they're able to use a pretty mundane, inoffensive power like flight, and they're able to use it and kind of weaponize it in a really interesting way. Kind of sort of like the Fastball Special, just with a flyer instead of Colossus doing the throwing. But Angel and Beast do something kind of like that here, where Angel basically throws Beast towards some of the Mutant Squad people, and that reminded me of X-Men issue 1 by Claremont and Jim Lee. So I don't have a whole lot more to talk about here. I really love this issue. Lots of really energetic, bombastic pages here. It doesn't feel like a slog reading this issue. If you told me 10 issues ago that I was going to be enjoying an issue of Silver Age X-Men, I probably would have told you were crazy. I remembered really liking this storyline with Mesmero, but I did not remember it being this good. So I really enjoyed this, really looking forward to the next issue, not looking forward to this storyline being over, because I know Arnold Drake doesn't stay on the book very long. I know that Jim Steranko doesn't stay on the book very long. So not looking forward to them leaving the series, but I also don't remember anything just exceptionally bad that comes after them. So maybe we are got some smooth sailing from here on out. So we will see. But for now, let's consider this issue examined.